What is that?
Hi. I'm a pair of legs that can talk.
Expedition 33 is one of those games that rewards
obsession.
Every time I think I've seen everything, I find some fascinating little detail that proves me wrong. Songs played in reverse, foreshadowing from this goofy marshmallow man, or some obscure French reference that sends me spiraling down a Wikipedia rabbit hole at 3 a.m. Over the past few months of making videos about this game, I've kept a list of every weird detail I ran into. Some of them made it into my previous videos, but most didn't. So here it is, 33 obscure details that you probably missed in Expedition 33. Let's start with something you can actually hear, a few songs in the soundtrack that are literal mirrors of each other. Take Dolorosa, the song that plays during Alicia's nightmare when Verso's caught in the fire. If you reverse these few seconds, you get something that sounds very familiar. If we pitch it up a bit, it makes this already haunting scene that much more striking. For the next one, let's jump over to Visages. The theme that plays in the Vale of Sadness sounds oddly distorted. When we run it backwards, we get this. It's a song that plays in Vale of Joy, so we have a reversed song for reversed emotions. Brilliant, but easy to miss if you're not listening closely. Moving on to Dark Shores, most people already know that this zone is larger than it first looks, with an entire section of the zone cut off by a boat. But what most players don't notice is that the enormous corpses dotting the zone and the world map are all of the same creature. It's the Scavenger, the optional boss from Yellow Harvest, from the exposed spine to the long spindly arms. So either there was once a lore reason for the Scavenger to be a world-spanning monster, or the devs just thought, that's creepy looking, let's use it everywhere. Either way, it further sells the idea that this world has a huge depth of violent history that we can only speculate at. For number 30, let's look at Verso's gravestone. We know it's dated December 33rd, a date that obviously doesn't exist. The fandom has been split on what exactly that means. Some say it's a wink to the French Republican calendar, others think it's a sign that the world that the Saunders inhabit isn't real, and some people think the devs just like the number 33. Sorry to disappoint you, but I don't have the answer. However, one thing I do want to point out is if we look a little closer, the inscription reads, "Forever painted in our hearts," translated from the French. At one point, Cleo walks over and puts down a bouquet of flowers, and the camera lingers here for a moment, showing us that the word forever is now covered by the flowers, leaving only painted in our hearts. It's a tiny thing, but it may symbolize the Descendre family finally accepting Verso's death instead of being frozen in grief. Or it's a coincidence, but it fits the kind of quiet symbolism that Sandfall hides all over this game. For number 29, let's go over to White Sands. The White Sands Manor has been one of the most talked about mysteries in the game. There's tons of theories out there about it, but we unfortunately don't have enough information for anything really solid. However, someone on Reddit took a closer look recently and found something really interesting. Hidden above the doorway is this design, and in the center is what looks like a stylized C. The same C that can be found at Clea's Endless Tower. So the thought is that this manor is connected to Clea somehow. One caveat though is that if you take a look in the same spot at the manor in Old Lumiere, you have that same C. So it could just be a red herring, something that the devs used purely for design aesthetic. Still, a pretty interesting find and impressive attention to detail. Next is 28. In Maelle's ending, there's a lot about Verso that's different. He looks slightly older, the scar over his eye is gone, and he's got some brand new threads. And if you look closely before the cut to black, you can spot a wedding ring on his finger. Now, the most likely explanation is that the devs just reused his Renoir suit outfit, which comes with a ring, but it's more fun to speculate on whether this was intentional or not, and what the developers may have been hinting at if it was, like the theory that the boy we see in the ending is Verso and Lune's child. We may never know if this was on purpose, and that uncertainty is what makes it so interesting. Then at the end of Act 2, Alicia wakes up in the manor, and it's made clear pretty quickly that she can't speak. Her vocal cords are too damaged from the fire that gave her her scars. Later, when she and Clair decide to hide the canvas, we cut to this shot where you really can't make out where they are.
If we bring Maman out of the canvas, she'll try to return. We must hide the canvas.
Well reasoned. And such a clever hiding spot you've chosen.
And we can hear Alicia speaking clear as day. And that detail seems like a big clue. Maybe that scene isn't happening in their world at all. Maybe they're inside another painting, which would explain why her voice suddenly works again. It's another easy to miss detail, since at this point in the game you're still reeling from everything that happened in the previous scene. Next is a tiny little detail about Sciel. In conversation with Verso at camp, he brings up the many bracelets she wears on one arm. She tells him they're gifts from her students back in Lumiere to remember them by. But she has something else on that arm, which may or may not be another gift from her students. It's a small wrist guard, and written on it is "To your promised birthday." It seems like a little hopeful message of good luck to Sciel, assuring that the expedition would be successful and she'd return home safely. Fun fact about this wrist guard, it looks like a guard that's worn by archers to protect their wrists when releasing a bowstring, meaning it's probably a remnant of Sciel's earlier class during development where she used a bow and arrow. The next two have to do with Esquie. Esquie's dialogue often comes across as comic relief.
I'm sorry, Verso.
Until you hit the third act of the game, when you realize that so much of what he's saying reveals little bits of the hidden plot. Sciel lost her husband Pierre years ago, and in her grief tried to drown herself, and Esquie saved her. So when Sciel thinks she's meeting Esquie for the first time,
It's you. Hello again, my terrible swimmer friend. You finally come to learn to swim?
at another point he says to Sciel, "I'm also sad when I lose my rocks." Pierre, the name of Sciel's husband, literally means stone in French. At first it sounds like he's just being big and silly, but it's him acknowledging her loss in his own goofy, lovable way.
Some wine stashed away, do you?
Wine?
And Esquie may have actually been named after Pierre Esquie, a renowned French architect from the 1800s. The references to French culture in this game just are never ending. Sandfall was clearly set on making the most French game that ever was or will be. In the Gestral village, there's this little guy who says, "I was just reborn at the Sacred River. I'm only X hours old." And that X ends up being different for everybody. It's the number of hours you've played up until that point. If you check your save file, it should match up pretty perfectly. Clever little Easter egg that the devs seemingly did just because they could. Next, let's take a look at the typewriters in Maelle's room. They're labeled Overwood, which is a little in-joke about Underwood, the real-world company that helped make the modern typewriter famous. For 21, let's go back to the Gestral village for a minute. Gestral village is absolutely stuffed with meme references. You've got the breakdancing cat from The Sims, the "This is fine" dog, even a One Punch Man Gestral is tucked in there. But here's one that I think most people miss. This Gestral kid shouts, "Philippe, I know where you're hiding, come here so I can put you down." This is a reference to an 80s action movie called Hitman La Cobra.
Philippe! Je sais où tu te caches! Viens ici que je te bute, enculé!
Number 20. At the Flying Manor, you meet a Gestral who cheerfully tells you he's on his way to the Sacred River. Then he happily jumps off the edge. I didn't think much of it at first, but it later hit me. He literally just threw himself to his death so he can be reborn at the river. One of those details that flips from funny to deeply dark once you realize what it means. Speaking of the Sacred River, we know the Gestrals look like paintbrushes, right? Wooden body, brush-like hair. And when they die, they can be revived at the Sacred River, washed clean and ready to go again. It mirrors how you'd revive a real paintbrush that's dried up. Wash it in water or turpentine, and it's mostly good as new. Number 18. In the monolith, there's a small grave with Gustave's arm resting on it. The tombstone shows two masks, the same ones you see earlier in Visages representing Verso. This feels like an intentional nod to Verso's betrayal, letting Gustave die so he could replace him and better manipulate Maelle. And speaking of Gustave, you ever notice his starting weapon is called Noah Ram, while every other weapon matches its user's name? That's because Gustave went through multiple iterations before the game's release. It was called Lucien, then Frey, then Noah. Leaving the weapon named as is may be paying homage to the last iteration of Gustave as Noah, or maybe Gustave Ram just doesn't roll off the tongue as well. And even the overworld map theme in Act 2 still references Noah. Number 16. If you ever stop to mess around with the pianos in the game, you'll notice that they're all playable. Verso plays beautifully while most of the others just plink out single notes at a time. But each character plays their own theme song from the OST. The only exceptions being Sophie and Minoko, who both play Aline's theme. It's a really simple and effective way to tie the music back to the character. In Verso's ending, the characters we've grown to love begin to fade away into nothingness.
I will miss you guys.
Oh, no.
After Sciel's gone, the camera pans over to Lune, who gives Verso a scathing stare before sitting down on the ground. This is actually a heartbreaking callback to Lune's rousing speech to Gustave early in the game.
We knew not all of us would make it, but we continue. As long as even one of us stands, our fight is not over.
With her down, there's no one left. Their world and everyone they care about are now doomed. Number 14. During the opening festival scene in Lumiere, right before the Gommage, you can actually see Sciel already there, dancing at the front of the stage. You don't interact with her, nobody calls her out, but once you spot her, it's unmistakable. 13's about the copy-pasted crowds. Sandfall reused a lot of assets across this game, but they did it cleverly enough that it never feels cheap. From Lumiere's crowds, random buildings, and the same Nevron and Expeditioner models spread everywhere as corpses. Makes sense for a game of this breadth and budget. But one spot where it might actually mean something is in Maelle's ending. When the camera zooms towards the theater, the crowd climbing the stairs is just a few NPCs duplicated over and over again. Given that Maelle is not exactly a gifted painter, it's easy to imagine that she literally painted the same people over and over, carbon copy souls in her failed attempt to bring everyone back. Already a bleak ending made even darker by this possibility. Number 12. In Clair's Flying Manor, there are all sorts of Nevron statues scattered all over the place. There's one though that you may not recognize, as you never actually see it anywhere in the game. That's because it's a dual sword cultist, one of the many cut or unfinished enemies that didn't make it into the final build. And if you play on PC, there's a mod out there that lets you fight a lot of those cut enemies. I recently did a video showcasing it if you want to go check that out. Number 11. Anyone who's beaten Simon, the optional superboss, knows his post-fight cutscene. But there used to be one line of dialogue that was seemingly removed after the launch. Maybe Sandfall just found it redundant or kinda cringe, but either way, they apparently thought the scene worked better without it.
Thank you.
And number 10, Sirene, the accent created by Renoir after his wife Aline, makes a lot more sense once you know her backstory. She's inspired by the real-life Renoir's wife, who was a dressmaker. The zone is covered in fabric and thread, the mini-me Nevrons wear these flowing gowns, and there's even a mini-zone called Sirene's Dress. The side boss, Tisseur, French for weaver, fits the same theme. Yet another cultural reference that shows how deep Sandfall went. Two of the most interesting Nevrons show up in the Forgotten Battlefield, the Ramasseur and Dualliste. Ramasseur means gatherer. It attacks you with the scavenged limbs of dead Nevrons, and it seems to have stitched together its own outfit from the dead remains of expeditioners. Look closely and you'll notice its hat is decorated with the armbands of different expeditions. One of the more quietly disturbing enemy designs in the game. Then there's Dualliste, the boss that you fight in a pit of blood and corpses. And its clothes are stitched together from expedition flags. It's grotesque and creepily symbolic. Most of the books you see in the manor have real-world counterparts. Looking closely, you can actually make out some of the titles, and they reference actual 19th century literature. The Illustrated Family Gymnasium, Ruined Abbeys and Castles of Great Britain and Ireland, the poetical works and remains of Henry Kirke White, and Shooting, Boating, and Fishing for Young Sportsmen. No one seems to have really mined these pages for hidden meaning. Maybe one day someone will take a hit for the team and go through them, but it's not going to be me. You don't formally meet Verso until the end of Act 1, where, of course, nothing tragic happens and Sandfall definitely doesn't rip your heart out. But his presence is there way earlier than that. The bronze statues found around Lumiere are of Verso. During the Gommage scene, you can hear his name dropped with other Sandres in the track Renoir. And when you first open the manor door in Flying Waters, the camera pans back to show him watching you from the shadows. He's also mentioned by several Gestrals. Noko brings him up, and a few of the villagers drop his name as well. But the biggest one is at Dark Shores, and the scene where most of the expedition dies, you can just barely see Verso rescuing Maelle, after which he carries her toward the manor where Gustave and Lune will find her later. Number 6. Exploring Verso's room in the manor is like walking into a sketchbook of the canvas's influences. There's a plush Esquie, a miniature train like the one in the Monolith, and the carousel near Frozen Hearts, and even a few Gestrals. The strangest detail is one of the paintings. It shows a figure who looks suspiciously like Lune. Considering she's one of Verso's romance options and the child in Maelle's ending could be theirs, it seems a little too strange to merely be coincidence. Going back to the very start of the game, if you pay attention in Lumiere, you'll see a lot of newspapers and posters scattered all over the place, and they actually have legible headlines. Do the Gestrals exist? The expedition, the failure? The Nevrons, a menace? And some of them are dated March 3rd, or 3-3. The nearby posters are even better. She's Watching You, the Paintress, the 56th Expedition, We Need You, Tales of the Sirene, and my favorite one, the Ochre Eater. This one depicts one of the massive Nevrons that devours the land. Ochre is a natural pigment used in painting, so from the first 10 steps of the game, they're already hinting at the world's painted nature. Then there's the dev cameos. Guillaume, one of Gustave's apprentices, is named after Guillaume Broche, the game's director. In the Gestral village, there's a Gestral playing guitar named Lorien Isso, after the game's composer, Lorien Testard. My favorite, though, is Gustave himself, who looks eerily similar to Tom Guillermin, Sandfall CTO. Marie Henry Bale, known by his pen name Stendhal, was an 18th century French writer. And named after the writer is Stendhal Syndrome, a psychological, intense, emotional and physical reaction to art or beauty. Infamous horror filmmaker Dario Argento made a movie titled Stendhal Syndrome. In it, the main character enters a fugue state when staring at paintings and actually falls into the world of one of them, a concept that feels right at home in Expedition 33. This next one's kinda dark. Painted Alicia, Visage, and the Maskkeeper, a representation of Verso, all have a weakness to fire in combat. It's the kind of thing that, yeah, it feels technically correct, but still, kinda messed up. For the last one, let's rewind a bit and go back to Renoir's atelier in the real world. If you look at the canvas long enough, you can kinda make out the painting underneath. It's the Gommage of Lumiere with people fading away in the petals. Back in the manor, when we unlock Renoir's atelier, we see another painting. So one could theorize that this is the same painting from the real world, and that this is actually the spot Alicia hid it. This raises all sorts of questions like, is the manor we visit in the canvas actually a separate canvas? Does it have anything to do with Alicia's painting of the manor pictured here? The problem, though, is that it's not actually the same painting. Beneath the moving chroma on this one is a different piece of artwork. It's Maelle facing down Alicia. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not meant to be the same one, but kind of an odd inconsistency if it is. And that's all 33. I hope you learned something new. Thanks for watching. If you found anything I missed, drop it in the comments. And if you like this video, subscribe for more. If you want to support the channel, you can donate at my Ko-fi link in the description. Thanks and have a great rest of your day.